Hey, Julian Kraus here, and this is probably one of the most recognizable interfaces simply because of its color. This is the Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 2nd generation, and let's have a closer look at how good it really is. Let's start out with the build quality. The interface is primarily made out of metal and feels pretty sturdy overall. The two gain knobs have a rubberized texture and they turn very smoothly. The only thing I'm not that fond of are the two metal knobs. I mean, they do look great, but they feel a bit chintzy. Overall, for the price, I still think that the build quality is decent. Oh, and I thought it was a nice touch that you get a matching red USB cable in the box. Okay, let's have a closer look at the front. You get two XLR and TRS combo inputs, and each input has its own gain knob right next to it. Around the knob is an indicator LED which turns green when there is a decent signal going into the Scarlett 2i2, and if you are clipping, the light turns red and orange. You also have a switch which lets you change the TRS input from a line level to an instrument input, and there are two of these, so one for each input. You have a button which turns the phantom power of the XLR inputs on and off. You also have a switch which enables the direct monitoring feature, and of course two more metal knobs. The big one controls the volume of your outputs on the back, and the smaller one controls the volume of your 1/4 inch headphone output. And not much stuff to see on the back actually. There are two TRS balanced outputs, the USB input, and a slot to connect your high security Kensington lock. Now let's go over the tech specs, and as always I have tested these specs myself and I will share the measurements with you. Focusrite claims that the 2i2 has a maximum sampling rate of 192 kHz and a bit depth of 24 bit. I can confirm these specs and say that the 192K sampling rate allows you to record frequencies way above the human hearing. With such a high sampling rate, the frequency response is flat from 10 Hz to about 50 kHz, where it starts to drop off. The 24-bit analog to digital conversion allows for a very high dynamic range, and Focusrite states that the 2i2 has a dynamic range of 106 dBA weighted. And that's really the dynamic range you can expect from this interface, because the 2i2 I tested had a dynamic range of 106.1 dBA. That's actually a very good value. With 106 dB dynamic range, you can leave yourself a fair amount of headroom while recording and still do not introduce any additional noise. The next thing I had a look at is the preamp noise of the 2i2. The equivalent input noise, which is a measurement of preamp noise, is apparently better than -128 dBu according to the manufacturer. And once again I can attest this. My 2i2 had an equivalent input noise of -128.2 dBu. This means that the 2i2 has pretty good preamps. Here is it compared to some other interfaces. As you can see, the EIN is a little worse than the Behringer UMC 202 HD, but it is better than the Rode AI1. That said, the difference between these interfaces will be negligible in practice because the difference in noise is only about 1 decibels. Have a listen for yourself. Like I said, in practice there is really no audible difference between the noise of these interfaces. And that's actually a good thing, because the Behringer and the Rode are very low noise interfaces, and so is the Focusrite 2i2. One thing I get asked frequently is if you need a fathead or cloud lifter when you use low sensitive dynamic microphones like the Shure SM7B with this interface. And I would argue that you do not need a fat lifter for your 2i2. The preamp is already pretty low noise, and adding a fathead, for example, you would only lower the noise floor by about 2 more decibels. In my opinion, this is not really worth it. And just to prove my point, you are currently listening to me speaking into a Shure SM57 dynamic microphone connected directly to the 2i2, and this is what it sounds like. and I will also let you listen to the noise floor I get with this setup. One more thing I always test is the amount of gain an interface provides. If the provided gain is too low, you might not be able to amplify low sensitive microphones sufficiently. The 2i2 has a gain of 46.3 dBFS at 0 dBu. This is a little lower than other interfaces, which typically are around 50. This means that with dynamic microphones, you will usually have to max out the gain on the 2i2 to get a proper recording level. But I would still say that this is just enough gain to drive any microphone out there, so don't worry about this too much. And I tested the impedance of the microphone input just because I can, and the Scarlett 2i2 has an input impedance of 3 kiloohms, and that's exactly what Focusrite states in their specs. This is a very common value for an interface to have, and that's totally fine. Lastly, I wanted to verify the maximum input level, and it all checks out. The Scarlett 2i2 can record professional line level, consumer line level, instrument level, and mic level on both inputs, which is nice to see because this way you can record pretty much any audio signal. One more thing I shortly want to talk about before wrapping this up is the experience I had connecting the Scarlett to a Windows 7 and Windows 10 PC. I did install the provided ASIO driver from Focusrite on my Windows 7 machine and started to do all my testing. One time when I was in the middle of a recording, it just stopped for about 5 seconds and then carried on with the recording. At some point it crashed Adobe Audition, and it also crashed Arta, which is the measurement software I used. And on one occasion I also realized that the 2i2 didn't put out any audio. I reconnected the interface and then it did work fine after that. I'm not too sure what this was all about, and my PC might have played a role in these scenarios, so take this with a grain of salt. But then again, this never happened with any other interface I tried before. On Windows 10 things worked much smoother for me. I installed the driver and the interface instantly worked fine. Although Adobe Audition crashed once when I switched the sampling rate of the Scarlett in Audition's menu. But so far I didn't have any other problems, and in fact this whole voiceover is recorded with a Scarlett 2i2 connected to a Windows 10 PC. Okay, so what's the verdict on this interface? Well, spec-wise I think the Scarlett 2i2 is a very good interface. You get a true 192K and 24-bit analog to digital conversion. The preamps are low noise, the amount of dynamic range it provides is excellent, and both inputs can handle pretty much any audio signal you ever want to record. The build quality is decent, and if you want to buy a red audio interface, the Scarlett 2i2 is a good choice. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe for more audio equipment reviews. I will see you in the next one.